Okay, so get ready, because today we're going to dive into a story that it really shows you just how brutal modern warfare can be, and how different the tech can be between the two sides. And also, sometimes you see like these little glimmers of humanity in these really intense situations. And all of this is from a YouTube video from a channel called Yarn Hub, and it's called When F-16 Falcons Ate Hawks for Breakfast.
It's a pretty gripping account of what's called the Banja Luka incident, which was, NATO's first ever combat engagement.
First ever. So this all happened during the Bosnian War in the early 90s. And just to set the scene a little bit, this was a super brutal conflict, just awful atrocities fueled by all these deep ethnic tensions. And so NATO steps in and says, okay, no more flying over Bosnia. They imposed a no-fly zone, right? To try to limit the air power and hopefully, stop some of the bloodshed.
Yeah, that no-fly zone is critical to the story. It's the whole reason this encounter happens,
Totally. So picture this. It's February 28th, 1994. 6 Yugoslav J-21 Jastrebs jets. These are like Cold War era aircraft. And they're piloted by volunteers from the Bosnian Serb Air Force. Their mission is to bomb a weapons factory. And leading them is a pilot named Ranko Vukmirovic.
Just think about the guts it takes to fly into a no-fly zone when you're probably going to be up against a way more advanced enemy. I mean, it says a lot about how committed these Serbian pilots were, maybe even desperate,
Yeah, for sure. And the video really highlights just how different these aging Jastrebs were from the American F-16 Falcons that are patrolling that no-fly zone.
Oh, yeah. The difference is huge. I mean, the F-16s have, advanced radar, way better weapons. They're just in a whole different league.
Yeah, so these Serbian pilots are approaching their target, and they have to climb to about 2,000 meters to do their bombing run. But of course, that puts them right on NATO's radar. And 50 miles away, 2 F-16s get the call. Black flight, you have 6 bogeys, flanking. That's got to be intense.
Oh, yeah, the stakes just went way up for everyone involved.
For sure. So the Serbian pilots, they know they've been spotted, but they're totally focused on hitting that factory. Vukmirovic, their leader, he sees those F-16s coming straight at them. And later, he says that if the F-16s had wanted to shoot him down, they could have done it right then from miles away.
That's interesting, isn't it? It's almost like a warning, turn back now or else.
Right, like a cat and mouse game, but in the air.
Mm-hmm.
The F-16s make this super fast pass just to show off how much faster and more maneuverable they are. And in the video, you can actually hear one of the F-16 pilots on the radio. He calls the Jastrebs old Yugos. It's almost funny, but in a really dark way.
Yeah, I mean, he's kind of just rubbing it in, we've got you totally outmatched.
Totally. But the Serbian pilots, they don't turn back. They press on and actually hit that weapons factory. And that's when everything changes. The F-16s get clearance to engage.
Yeah, that's a big turning point, not just in this fight, but in NATO history as a whole.
Absolutely. And one of the American pilots, you can hear him on the recording too, he says, this is going to be shooting fish in a barrel. I mean, just think about how chilling that is.
I mean, yeah, it's harsh, but it shows you just how much of an advantage they had. The Serbian pilots were brave and all, but they never really stood a chance. It's the difference between a modern army and a medieval one.
And so the chase is on. The F-16s have these weapons that the Serbian pilots can't even counter. And they start taking down the Jastrebs one by one. One of the pilots, Lasan Krnalic, he talks about how terrified he was when a missile exploded near his plane. And it took out his wingman, who was flying right next to him.
Oh, man, I can't even imagine. Just total chaos, pure fear. You realize there's nothing you can do. Your skills just don't matter against that kind of technology.
And another pilot, Mikarevic, he sees his wingman get hit by a missile. And then his own engines get hit, and he manages to eject just seconds before his plane explodes in this giant fireball.
Wow. These stories are just a reminder of how real the cost of war is, even in a fight that seems totally one-sided.
Vukmirovic, the flight leader, he sees all of this happening around him. And he and his wingman, Goran Zaric, they try to use the terrain to their advantage. But the F-16s, they just keep coming.
They're just trying to survive at this point, right, using every bit of skill they have.
And then Vukmirovic does something crazy. He flies straight toward a cliff face, hoping he can somehow outmaneuver the F-16s that are closing in.
I mean, that's pure desperation.
They pull up at the very last second, but Vukmirovic's plane hits the ground and explodes. Zaric sees it all happen. His leader is gone. It really shows you how how much of a difference technology can make. These were good pilots,
Yeah.
but they didn't have a chance.
And it gets worse, The F-16s are still going after Zarch. He's doing everything he can to shake them. But an AM-9 missile hits him, and his plane is destroyed. He ejects, but he's too low. The parachute doesn't have time to open, and he's killed.
Man, it's just brutal how this whole thing played out. They were fighting a losing battle from the start. Remember Chronology, the pilot who lost his wingman earlier. His plane is messed up. He's barely able to fly. He's trying to get back to base. And that's when an F-16 catches up to him.
This is where the story takes kind of a crazy turn.
Yeah, so Chronology is like bracing himself, waiting to get blown out of the sky. And then the American pilot does something really unexpected. He pulls up next to him, looks him right in the eye, and salutes.
Wow. Just wow. Imagine that, you're looking at the guy you were just trying to kill and you salute him. What makes someone do that?
Right. It's like, it makes you think about what it means to win in a situation like that. Like, yeah, the Americans won the fight, but that salute, it adds this whole other layer to it.
Yeah, it's more than just a military victory. It's like a victory of compassion, of empathy.
Exactly. It's like, even in these crazy situations, there's still room for humanity. What do you think was going through that pilot's head?
Who knows? Maybe it was just instinct, Or maybe he was trying to send a message.
It's hard to say.
Yeah.
But the video, it actually identifies the pilots. They were Robert Wilbur Wright and Stephen Yogi Allen. Wright is credited with 3 kills from this engagement, which is the most for any USAF pilot since the Korean War.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, and Allen got 1 kill.
So, these weren't just faceless enemies, right? They were real people with skills, with courage, and sometimes even with compassion.
It's a tough thing to think about, Like, on the one hand, you have these Serbian pilots who are just trying to do their job. And on the other hand, you have these American pilots who are tasked with enforcing this no-fly zone. And they have to make these really tough decisions with life or death consequences.
Yeah, it's a good example of how technology can totally change the way wars are fought.
Right. The Serbian pilots, they were brave, but their planes were just no match for the F-16s.
It was like bringing a knife to a gunfight,
Totally. Remember when those F-16s first showed up? One of the Serbian pilots said, "American Ferraris." Like, you could hear the awe in his voice, but also the fear.
Yeah, he knew they were in trouble.
And then right before the Americans attacked, you hear that pilot say, "This is going to be shooting fish in a barrel."
Chilling. It really shows you how one-sided this fight was.
Yeah.
Makes you think about what a fair fight even means anymore.
For sure.
When technology makes such a big difference, can any fight really be fair?
Yeah, it's something to think about.
This whole incident, it's not just about a dogfight, it's about what it means to be in a war. The decisions you have to make, the pressure you're under, and sometimes even the little bits of humanity that you see in the middle of all that.
Yeah, and the fact that this was NATO's first ever combat engagement, it just adds another layer to it.
Right. It shows you how quickly things can escalate.
Yeah.
And how the decisions you make in those moments can have long-lasting consequences.
It really makes you think about what it even means to win in these situations,
I know, right?
On paper, it's like, okay, the Americans, they totally won. But then you have that salute, that moment where they choose not to kill Chronology. It just makes you wonder.
It's just not that simple.
And at the end of the video, Chronology, he actually says, "I don't have any bad feelings towards the American pilots. We had our task, they had theirs."
Wow. That's powerful.
It's like, even though they were enemies, he understood,
Yeah, they were both just doing what they had to do.
And it makes you think about all the other people involved in wars, too. Not just the pilots, but the soldiers, the civilians, everyone.
They all have their own stories, their own experiences.
And those stories matter. They remind us that there's always more to the story than what you see on the news,
Absolutely.
So, yeah, it's been a pretty heavy deep dive.
There's definitely a lot to think about.
But it's important to learn about these things,
I agree.
To remember what happened and to think about how we can prevent it from happening again.
Well said.
So, until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep those deep dives going.